So I'm here today to kind of rant, to kind of air out and just release frustration that I've been feeling probably since I've become concerned with the Black struggle, which really began in college. And it's that burning feeling where you see certain issues that are going on and you know that certain things could be done to do them, but you realize there's just no forum for them to get done. And I think for me, the biggest struggle I've always had with different things going on in politics is trying to be consistent. So, um, I write a blog, but sometimes it's hard to be consistent and always write a blog because you realize that sometimes it's like you're writing to no one. You're expressing your feelings, and at the end of the day, those forums where Black thought get shown tend not to relate to your thinking, tend not to relate to the way that you feel about things. And so a lot of my frustration for today kind of comes out of the Black Lives Matter movement. Now, up until this point, I really haven't had much bad to say about the movement, um, principally because it's just been nice for in my lifetime. I'm early 20s, so it's been really nice to see some type of mobilization of Black people, see some type of demonstration, because for a while, there wasn't really anything going on. I mean, you had those cases with Al Sharpton, Jesse Jackson comes in, and people get mad, but they just fade and fizzle. But this is the first time in my lifetime well, not in my lifetime, but certainly in recent years and in my memory, where Black people are actually mobilized and ready to do something. So I never really had much of a critique for the movement, although I had some underlying feelings. And I know one feeling for me has been that the movement has almost been taken over by different fringe elements of things that don't necessarily have to do with Black people. So it's like, for example, when you say Black Lives Matters, obviously you're saying Black Lives Matter. Like, it's not uh, Black men's lives matter. But because of the dialogue that the media has chosen to highlight, which is Black men being a Black Lives Matter and being um, the predominant force of which we are mobilized around, we have to say, well, Black women's lives matter. So we have the Black women's lives matter people over here. And then you have the trans lives matter over here. And this lives matter, this. It's just like it gets pulled apart. And so many fringe elements were developing. And so from what I've seen, rather than say, listen, Black lives obviously encompass all of that, you kind of see those same activists who or on the forefront or on the front line of the Black Lives Matter saying, hey everyone, yeah, Black women's lives matter, hey, trans lives matter, instead of just saying, obviously we're talking about all of you. So that early on was something frustrating to me, but I never really thought about it too much. But I think with recently the Bernie Sanders protests, that kind of made me like, okay, seriously? Like, I'm no fan of the political process in America. Honestly, I feel like if someone says I'm not going to vote because my vote probably won't do much, you're probably right. I'm not too big on politics. I'm not too big on the money in politics. I'm big on politics in a way, but in a way, it's like I just think it's all a scam, and so I'm not going to, ride too hard for one candidate. At the same time, of anyone, because honestly, didn't even plan on voting until Bernie Sanders came out. And so it was interesting. The candidate who was probably more likely to be um, on the side of Black Lives Matters, more likely to have actually the integrity, because if you look up his track record, he has the integrity to articulate these issues, you cut off his rally. And so automatically I'm like, okay, that's not politically smart, like, what are you doing? And not to mention, it's like Hillary Clinton wasn't getting anything either. So all of this to say, the movement to me, it's kind of disappointing. And the reason why I find it disappointing is because it's all that's really going on. And my fear is that in the era that we are in, we're kind of in an area that's controlled by the media. So the media really, even social media, we're also controlled by social media. So there's certain channels to where you'll get put on, and the media has the ability to make something look like that's all that's going on. And because we believe that the media is reality, we're so sucked into this that we don't really articulate the fact that there could be different groups. So for example, during the civil rights movement, there wasn't just the people who, oh my gosh, follow Martin Luther King. It's on the top of my tongue, but I can't think of it right now. But there wasn't just Martin Luther King's group. There was CORE, there was SNCC, there was so many fringe groups. The NAACP was its own group. Then you had, of course, the Nation of Islam. You had so many different groups. You had the socialists. You had just so many groups. But rather than having multiple groups who are connected to the community first, articulating what is going on, we kind of have one broad stroke that the media has been willing to paint, which just says Black Lives Matter. And because of the difference in the role the media plays today from back then, I really fear that that is the only stroke, the brush stroke that we're going to get. Because honestly, a lot of people, even who I guess were in the Black Lives Matter movement, came out against what some of the protesters were doing by protesting Bernie Sanders. So, but regardless, if you're for Black Lives, you're going to be painted with the Black Lives Matter, paint stroke. So basically what I'm saying is, I wish we could see something else happen. I wish that we can pull away from the media for a second and really just have some type of forum where we could really discuss our issues, and not on CNN, not on any of these programs, but among ourselves. But unfortunately, not a lot of people in my experience, or from what I can see, are really going that direction. So that was kind of a rant, but it's frustrating, because to me, I know so much that could be done. But even just for me in my personal life, like, who do I really have that can really unite with me to do something like that? To me, it's like the biggest problem in the Black community. Yeah, police brutality is horrible, but police brutality only exists because of the constructs of poverty. Anytime you have such a large proportion of your population in poverty, you're going to need a police force to control them. That's really what police brutality is coming from. Yet we're not dealing with the poverty issue. We're not dealing with the economic issue. We're not dealing with the fact that Black people are basically like on the other side of other people's choices. We don't have power. We don't deal with those things. And these aren't new ideas. These are things that people have been talking about way longer than I've been alive. Yet, for some reason, we always tend to go the other way. We even with in all respect to Dr. King, but even with him when he came, we heard him, and we want that way. We want the way that honestly is easier, because honestly it's easier to ask the system for what you need rather than to articulate it yourself and put yourself in that position to get it yourself. Self-sufficiency. I mean, it's way easier to be asking and begging than to be self-sufficient. It takes more work, it takes more dedication, it takes more things you have to build on. we always tend to go the easier way. We always tend to go the, rather than, getting control of our communities, let's just protest. Rather than trying to pull our money together, let's just protest. Let's just write a petition. Let's just go on Twitter and say this, that, and the third. Let's black out our profiles. Let's just do all of this rather than actually get to the root of the problem. But anytime that you are that population that is so disproportionately in poverty, you're always going to be on the other side of the other person's wit. So that being in mind, it's like we know what we have to do. We know what we have to do, but for some reason, it's like we act like we don't know, or we act like the other way works. Although we have a map called books, a map of what's happened before, a map of, things from as far back as Marcus Garvey, as far back as Dr. King and Malcolm X, and the Panthers, Stokely Carmichael. We have, documents and documents showing you that when you kind of go the way of begging someone for something rather than demanding it, it's always going to have the same result. And that's the frustration. That's the frustration. And I don't know. I really hope somehow that we can get around the media's dialogue and really have our own. So, yes, I'm done ranting.